Good afternoon, everyone. I was just about to say good morning. We've ticked over to the afternoon, just gone 12 o'clock. I'm just looking at the participant numbers. We're ticking up gradually. So I think we've got a few more people trickling in, but let's get started, conscious of, as we are of time. So thank you for joining us for this session this afternoon on conversations around academisation as part of our conference this year. I'm David, I'm Head of Trustee Recruitment at Academies for Schools. Delighted to be joined by Jackie Eason here this morning for this session. And we're delighted to have so many of you with us as well. Actually, thank you for joining us. And I hope those who've been in other sessions so far today find it really useful and informative. And then hopefully this will be another session that really helps provide some more insight and information. So while we just kind of wait for the final few people to filter in, I'll take the opportunity to just go through a few housekeeping items if I can. So firstly, this session, like all of the others across the conference, is being recorded. We'll be sending out links to access the recordings in the coming days, sort of technology and turnaround times permitting on that. So you should receive those links to access the recordings in the next few days. And secondly, the whole event across both today and tomorrow, the second day tomorrow, is CPD accredited. So if you would like your certificate, we do need your consent to share the data with the service after the session. So to confirm your consent, please remember to fill out the survey at the end, and we can't send that certificate without your consent, so please do that. If you've got any questions that you'd like to put forward to Jackie or to myself through the course of this session, please use the Q&A chat function in the bottom on the bottom bar, and we'll endeavour to get to as many of those as we can, time permitting again. And if for any reason you're not able to, or you're disconnected from the session today, you can get back in again by clicking the same Zoom link to get back in. It's the same link that will give you access. And finally, a massive thank you to IET, to Institution of Engineering and Technology, for the sponsorship of the conference this year. We're really grateful to the IET for all of their support to allow us to put the event on. So without further ado, I'll hand on to Jackie from CST, who's going to kind of run you through some first slides here. Then we'll have a chance for a chat after Jackie's finished her slides. Thanks, Jackie.
Oh, thank you very much, David, and thank you everyone for joining me today. I was delighted to be invited to have a conversation with you about academisation. As David said, I work with the CST as a governance consultant, but in my spare time for joy, I am chair of a multi-academy trust down in the southwest of England. We've got 6 schools in our trust. I'm particularly thrilled to join you today about a conversation about academisation. I think it's been on our minds for a long time. But when the government issued their white paper in March 2022, I think it brought this more to the forefront for all of us. So what I was going to do, I'm going to talk for about 10-12 minutes. I was going to revisit that white paper and what restarted this conversation for us all. And then the white paper refers to strong trusts. I was going to look at the governance structure within a multi-academy trust. And forgive me if you're already in one and you know that really well, but I thought it'd be worth just visiting it for people that are maybe not so familiar. And then talk about actually what does strong governance really look like? What should we be expecting to see in a trust with really good, strong governance? So if I move on to my slides, just a reminder, some of you will have read this white paper when it came out. It's currently making its way through Parliament to become a schools bill. And it had 4 key strands in it. So the first 3 key strands were all about education and how the government's vision for improving education, what that's going to look like. So the first one around the principle of having an excellent teacher in front of every child. The government were committing to world-class CPD and increasing teachers' salaries, which is impacting on our budgets at the moment, just to bring more people into the profession. The second strand, if I remind you, was around commitment to the curriculum, the ongoing commitment to the Oak National Curriculum, and further advice and guidance for teachers on managing behaviour, attendance and exclusions. The third strand was around targeted support for every child. So a parental pledge to every child from disadvantaged backgrounds, children who access pupil premium funding, that they'll get the right support at the right time, by the right people, in the right place. And commitment to continue working with the Education Endowment Foundation and a broader use of pupil premium. So that was the white paper sort of education strand, but it's the 4th strand where we as governors are really interested, because it's recognition of the fact that that will only work if we get a stronger, fairer school system. And the 4th strand is what I'm going to focus on in this next slide, Because what does a stronger, fairer school system look like according to the Department for Education? And it's a really clear message that by 2030, all children will be taught in a school which is in a strong multi-academy trust, or they'll be taught in a school who has plans to join a strong multi-academy trust. So if we wind our minds back to 2016, we recall Nicky Morgan and the government was going to mandate academisation quite quickly. Actually, that date has passed. This white paper doesn't do that. What it's saying is this is the direction of travel, and it's a strong direction of travel. And one of our roles as governors, isn't it, is to horizon scan. So this is coming. They've put some more detail in it. Let me just briefly go through those. So we're going away from the dual system at the moment, maintained and academy, and we are heading towards a fully academised system. If you are currently a school who sat on 2 consecutive or more requires improvement judgments, less than good, your school will be receiving a letter this month or shortly from your Regional Delivery Directorate, used to be called the Regional Schools Commissioner, basically to look at your school and say, how can we get that school into a strong trust? And that's whether you're a maintained school or an academy. In my academy trust, we've got one school that sat on double requires improvement. It came into our trust like that. And we're receiving one of those letters as well to say, is this vulnerable school in the right place? So that's another bit of power to the department for academisation. The direction of travel is towards larger trusts, so 7,500 pupils or at least 10 schools. Recognise the fact that 10 tiny primaries are not going to make 7,500 pupils, but the message is that larger trusts have the capacity to deliver the educational improvement that the white paper is looking for. Making sure there's not monopolies in areas, so you should have choice. It's really important that you choose the right trust. So within each locality, individual schools should be able to choose an individual trust. We were really pleased at the CST to see there was this strong message around local governance arrangements in schools. So the paper is very much supporting the importance of listening to local voice. And many of you, if you're currently in maintained schools, you'll be joining at that local academy governance level. And the final one, where in your area there are not enough strong trusts, then the local authority might be able to set one up. It won't then be a local authority trust in any way different to other school trusts, but they will be the instigators and the people that set it up. So that's scene setting really, isn't it? That's the journey we're on, and these are the tools that the government are going to use to get to that stronger, fairer school system. I've said the word strong trust enough times now that I think I should probably define it for you. And I thought what might be best is what I've done here is I've taken sort of the 6 areas that the department think make school trusts strong. And I'm going to just talk about it briefly in the context of my trust. So number 1, strong leaders take responsibility for more schools. So 2 years ago, we appointed a CEO who's an outstanding primary head. And she's now able to spread her magic across all 6 of our schools. So she's also doing the CEO's development leader training. So the really strong leaders can have a broader impact. Shared accountability for standards across the trust. Our 6 head teachers work together week on week, day on day. They have accountability in each other's schools. They're a team. And when one school has an area of weakness, all of them work together. And that collaboration goes down through every single level in our trust. So our teachers have research circles. So for example, all our history leads, and we've got secondary and primary in our school, I'm talking all of our history leads work together in curriculum development and developing best practice. We have opportunities across our trust for teacher recruitment, in that we have an HR department, which is fantastic because it's so important to get that recruitment right. And in terms of retention, we can offer people opportunities. For example, one of our primary heads is really fantastic. He's an ambitious young man, and we've been able to offer him executive leadership over more than just his primary school. So we've retained his skills and knowledge in our trust. And we have an extensive CPD programme. Support where it is targeted, where it's most targeted. One of our secondaries, the GCSE results weren't quite where we hoped they were. So we've been able to respond immediately with real agility. Right, we've got additional support in that school now so that we can intervene and get those standards up really quickly. And the centralised back office function is fantastic. We have a COO who looks after all of the estates, the IT, the HR, the finance, the resources, which takes that focus away from the heads so they can focus on the teaching and learning. So that's the broad definition of what a good, strong trust looks like. And they are the benefits of strong trusts. There is a dialogue out there still where people doubt. And yes, in the past, there have been trusts that haven't got it right. There are trusts that do get it right, just in the same way we have maintained schools that get it right and others struggle. But I thought this was a powerful piece of research, and I'll contextualize it for you. This is from 700 schools, and the research was undertaken by the IFF on behalf of the DFE. So I know that statistics tell a story on their own, don't they? But I think this is quite powerful data. This is asking head teachers, what was the impact of your school joining a school trust? And the top row is primary, the row below is secondary, and the green is positive. So that's a really powerful, 70 to 80% positive from joining a trust. The cream colour is made little or slight difference, and the red is the negative. So in general, people are reporting when they join a school trust, it's positive. And I put that slide in some ways to counter when I work with maintained schools thinking about it, I often hear a yes, but trusts are dreadful. I think the body of evidence to say that actually there's really powerful, great stuff happening in school trusts is growing. In the DFE's white paper, they've got a definition of what a strong trust is. And I've already spoken to some of that. They talk about the quality of inclusive education, agility of school improvement, financial management, back office, and the workforce. But I wanted to put up here a definition of strategic governance. So what do they mean by strong trust governance? They're looking at, do they have a really good governance structure? Does the trust actually live and breathe the values that they say that they live and breathe? And when I say trust, I mean everybody in the trust, so the governance structure at every level. Do they have the right people at every single level of governance so that they've got the skills and the knowledge in order to perform governance appropriately? Are they the genuine strategic leaders of the trust? So have they got that really clear vision that isn't just a wordy, sort of fluffy vision? Do the trustees hold a really clear vision of where they want this trust to go? And do they hold the CEO, the senior trust leader, to account for taking them there? And is that strategic direction shared all the way through the trust? So everybody's pulling in the same direction in a really powerful way. And do they have a strong local identity? So it's just as an example, it's in our CEO's job description that she will preserve and protect the local identity of each of our really unique schools, because they're very different. All schools are different. And it's good to see the government recognising that in their definition. And does the trust engage really effectively with parents in the wider community? So is this an outward-facing trust? So that's the DFE's definition of strong governance, and just remember that for if and when you're considering joining a trust. So here's the governance structure of a multi-academy trust. You'll notice that we've got the members that you don't have in the maintained school. So the members are the eyes on, hands off role. They're the shareholders of the company, if you like. They have a really important role in that they appoint and can remove the trust board. So why would they remove trustees? They would remove trustees or appoint new ones if the trustees were not fulfilling those three core functions of governance. So the vision and values and strategy, the holding the senior leaders to account, and the financial probity and financial management. They've got a really important role. So as I just said, the governance, the day-to-day governance and that accountability sits with the trust board. And the trust board can establish whichever committees they require. They can have a finance committee, an audit committee, risk, education committee. I've just used resources and standards as an example there. And then they'll have the local academy committee layer of governance beneath. You might call that local governing bodies, local advisory boards, but local academy committees, and that's at the school level. So here is the question I often hear asked: if the governance sits at trust board level, what's the role of the local academy committees? And I can't stress enough how important that role of a local academy committee is. When we started with setting up trusts, a few trusts made the decision to remove local governance, and that caused problems for a number of trusts, because they stopped hearing the voice, they stopped hearing the local voice, and they couldn't really keep track of what was happening in the schools at a trust board level. So here is what I often find. One of my jobs I do is I do lots of external reviews of governance. And when I see governance working well, the local academy committee's got a really clear remit to monitor closely the progress of the school development plan, because that's what drives improvement in the school. They scrutinise really carefully the data and standards that are presented to them. So not just attainment and progress data, but all forms of data. They evaluate really carefully the improvement strategies. So for example, a trust might have a MAT-wide behaviour policy. So it's at the local level that the local governors can evaluate the impact of that on their particular school. And they communicate with the local school community. So they're the forward facing, they're the face that people know. And then they've got that role of consultation, representation to and from the trust board. So that might be something that you might see the local academy committee doing. But it's totally different across lots of different trusts. People are trying different models. But as long as they can communicate and fulfill that role, that's the important thing. The other important thing I would add is I would be very wary of any local governing bodies who have it set out in a document called Scheme of Delegation that we all publish on our trust websites. If they're saying that the local governors ensure standards within the local academy, because the head teacher is performance managed by the CEO, and you can't be held to account in two different directions, can you? So it's really the CEO's job to ensure that the head's doing the role really well. Okay, so that's scene setting again. So what do we see when it all works well? What we see when the trust governance is working well, we see that the vision and values are aligned across the trust and everyone's pulling in the same direction. And that's powerful in itself, isn't it? And that leads to deep collaboration. We see that communication is transparent, so the trustees know the school well, and the people at the local governance level can talk to the trustees. And we know that accountability is held, because everyone at different level of governance has got their specific roles, and one level holds the next level to account. It's not good practice to see one person appearing as a member and a trustee. Oh, and there they are at the local level as well. Relationships are strong, because we can only really challenge someone when relationships are strong and communication's been open. So we need to see that in governance structures. We need to see qualified professional governance professionals. So we used to call them clerks, we now call them governance professionals, in recognition of the vastness of their role and the importance of their role in supporting governance. Simple structures, not overly complicated, not 40 meetings a term, simple so that communication can flow. Stakeholder voice is heard, particularly through the local academy committees. We want to see a whole trust governance development plan. If you were thinking about joining a trust, what's their governance development plan? Because I'd worry about a school that said, no, I haven't got a school development plan, we're fine. Governance is the same. We need to evolve it all the time and really think about how we can move on and get better. And everyone at every level of governance is aware of how the trust improves outcomes for pupils and staff. So if you're part of this collaborative school improving organisation, everyone should be able to articulate the impact that the trust has. Because it's all about the pupils and how we support them and how we support the staff, isn't it? And I've only got one more slide, David, before we go to questions. And my slide in itself is about questions, just to really set the scene for our conversation we're about to have. I wonder how many of you came to this with the question of, should my school become an academy in your mind? And that's the question I've asked myself many times. And it was only really through working with the CST and with Laura Crudis, our CEO, that a better question has been framed for me. And you might spot this maybe a slightly leading question, but it's not about whether your school should be an academy. It's about how can you as governors make the best choice for your school and make sure that your school is a school that collaborates with others. It's within a strong and resilient structure so that every child has the opportunity to do all the learning that they need to do. The adults are supported with CPD opportunities so that everybody can thrive within that community. Now, would it be a good idea for me to stop sharing the slides, David, or shall we leave the slide up?
Let's leave that up just for now, for a bit of a backdrop, Jackie, if that's okay. You've had good questions coming in. I'm going to try and group a few of those into potential themes and a couple of questions perhaps to throw in there as well for you to keep us going along. So one of the questions that's been up a couple of times from the audience there was around church schools and how church schools might fit into MAP and how the challenges might be facing kind of church schools and faith schools. Is there kind of any view from you on how that might look and what the challenges might be facing those kind of situations?
Absolutely, and what I found is that it varies tremendously across the country. So different dioceses have approached this completely differently. So in Cornwall, for example, our diocese is very open to mixed mats. So we have some faith schools with non-faith schools, and the diocesan approach is that they just want 2 members from the diocese and 2 trustees from the diocese and a representation at the local level. And then the whole trust is expected to uphold that Christian distinctiveness. I know in other areas of the country, the diocese really wants to just keep all the church schools together, all faith schools together, and the articles are different. In other areas of the country, the diocese is happy for church schools to join mixed mats, but they want fully church articles of association, so legal documents. So I would say my number one piece of advice there really would be communication. If you're in a church school, speak to your diocese and find out how the land is lying.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. So kind of more the detail of what happens when a school might join a trust. What staff rights do staff get as part of being in that trust? Are they forced to move schools if required? What are the kind of implications for the people involved in kind of delivering the education and the structures around a school once moving into a trust?
Yeah, so there's really we go through a TUPE procedure, which is all your rights as a member of staff are protected, so you will not be adversely impacted by joining a trust. They have to put what's it called? Is it mitigations measures? They have to note any measures that will change in people's terms and conditions if you join a trust. Part of the process of joining a trust is you will have a number of meetings with the unions where all of these questions can be raised. Are there expectations to go and work elsewhere? I think that varies from trust to trust. I know in our trust, we do have some staff who live in Penzance and work in Foy, but that's negotiated. We work really closely with our unions. So if an expectation of travel increased, then you would be looking at relocation packages and things like that.
I'm conscious, Jackie, of obviously there's lots of benefits to be had here. Some of the graphics that you've shown us today show that there's a lot of positives and benefits to be had from moving into a trust, but being realistic, that potentially isn't always the case. What are some of the negatives that could be encountered, and what are the ways to kind of think about that? What questions might governors who were here with us today consider when thinking about potentially taking this step, and what are the right questions to be asking?
That's a great question. Now, I have thought about the negatives because I know I've been a really strong proponent of the positives. So sorry, I should repeat the question. The question was, what are the negatives and what questions should you ask? So I think one of the negatives, if I'm absolutely honest, and I think maintain schools have it as well, it's recruitment. And you really need a strong trust board. Now, I know governors for schools, you're helping with recruitment now with trustee recruitment service.
That's right.
So I think that's really going to help because it's really hard to get quality people at every level of governance. I think there is a negative in terms of communication. As a structure gets bigger, you've got to work really hard at communicating. and you can drop a ball so easily, and then when communication lapses, trust lapses. So I'd say they're the two challenges. A third challenge is if you're a SAT, single academy trust. I worry about SATs. I know some of them are outstanding and they're doing amazingly, but many of them are isolated, and I worry about them.
Is there anything to, sorry Jackie, just to kind of jump in there and potentially segue slightly, but to kind of bring in another question, is the potential here, and I don't want to dwell too much on the negatives equally, but I think it is important in this conversation to kind of reflect what might be downsides. Is the potential for disruption in education to the young people? Obviously, the reason we're in this business, the reason why we're delivering what we do is for the education of young people. What might be the downsides to that in terms of the actual education delivery?
Yeah, I'm really confident in answering that question, having brought a couple of schools into trusts who didn't want to come, and that was a really key question. And I've said time and time again, your children will notice no negative differences. And many don't even notice a difference at all, which could maybe lead you to say, well, what's the point anyway? But actually, all that should happen is the people that work within the trust are better supported. There won't be, now I can't say that actually because I don't know. I have never come across a trust that came in and insisted on complete uniform changes and changes that impacted negatively on the children. I think the thing to remember is it's really important. The trust's sole aim is to improve outcomes for children. It's to improve education for public benefit, and they're only going to make decisions that do that. I'm conscious of only 4 more minutes. I've got one more slide to sort of sum up final things people need to think about. Would that be a good idea to put that one up now?
Yeah, definitely, Jackie. If I just very, very quickly, a 30-second answer if we can. I mean, it's a really topical question. It's a question that probably is on a lot of people's minds in terms of the current political climate and the white paper and the potential schools bill. How might any changes there affect this landscape, and how any schools that are considering moving into trust or have this on their radar, what concerns might arise there, and how should we be thinking about that at this moment in time?
From the political situation in the schools bill?
In terms of how the future might look. I know it's not we haven't got crystal balls, but what might we be thinking around that?
I wouldn't like to be a political commenter at all. The future to me is, it's looking like academisation. It's looking like start planning for the future. Do your due diligence. I am going to, probably just to avoid the political question, David, I'm just going to put the next slide up. Because I think this sums up a little bit about what people should be thinking about. If I was in a maintained school now, I would be looking at my governance and thinking we need to have a really good conversation about our future. Where's our school going? What is our vision for our school? Recognise the fact that this is a really tricky process, and change management, you're going to have to manage this change really carefully. So I would look to actually getting someone on your board that knows how to project manage. Because the way you manage this is going to be as important as the decisions that you make. Reach out for help to your regional director, your diocese, your LA for support and advice. Perform your due diligence really carefully. So by due diligence at a local governing level, talk to the schools that are in the trust that you're looking at. Find out what the impact of the trust is. Talk to the local governing bodies that are in your trust. And actually look really carefully at the vision and values of the trust that you're thinking you might join. Don't underestimate the fear around this for staff. I think handle that really carefully and really sensitively, and communicate. Obviously, our Nolan principles. We communicate openly and honestly at all times, but you don't want to set hairs running. So you know your schools really well. You'll know how to make these decisions for the best way for the children. And that's the final point, really. As governors, we need to make sure we're making the right decision for the children and for the future of the school, and make sure we don't have vested interest. It's not about us. It's never about us. It's about the future of the school.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Jackie. I mean, I know we've had lots and lots and lots of questions that have come in, and I think the slot that we've had, potentially we probably could have done 2 or 3 times the length to kind of try and get through some of those questions. So we really conscious of the validity and making sure that everyone has a chance to have the answers to those questions where we can give them. So we'll take away all those questions that have been asked in the chat, in the question box, and provide those responses as we can. Jackie's put some further reading up on the screen now. We're conscious of the fact that people have other sessions to get to. So just to kind of reiterate the fact that we will be sending out the webinar recordings to everyone to kind of revisit. If you've got any questions that come off the back of those, please do drop them into us again. You'll see our hashtag on the screen there, GFS Conference 2022. Please do include us on your socials, and any kind of questions around the CPD accreditation, contact my colleague Louisa, whose email address is on the screen there. And as I say, we'll aim to come back to you with any questions, with any answers we can provide to those questions duly, because we appreciate there's been lots and lots of things that have been prompted, and we just ran out of time in this half-hour slot. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you massively again, once again, to IET for their support. Thank you to Jackie for joining us and leading the discussion here, and thanks everyone for your time in this session today. And we hope to see you on more of our sessions this afternoon and tomorrow.